Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, whoever is watching this. I am Nisanka. I help parents who parent with narcissistic partners or ex partners to preserve sanity, get their life back, and support their children. I've got Amanda here today as well. I've got Amanda as well as my unbrushed hair this morning, by the way. We're based in the UK, so it's the UK, it's the morning, well, kind of ish for us here. But join us. We're going to talk about something really, really important. So, we're going to talk about triggers and how to recognize them and how to work with the triggers that we feel we get. So, stay tuned, stay with us. And if you have any questions, drop it in the comment. We'll come back to you with maybe more content and more answers. Or, or just visit either of our websites and you can have more information and stay tuned. So, Amanda, why don't you introduce yourself and then we'll take it from there?
Hi, everyone. So it's been quite a while. It's good to be back. So I help mainly women break free from the toxic grip of their narcissistic ex and help them basically maintain their composure while co-parenting. Co-parenting.
Yes, that's the bubble.
Yes.
We'll break the bubble to begin with. You really cannot co parent with a narcissistic partner. So that's an acceptance you will have to come to if you really want to support your children. Anyway, so Amanda, why don't you start with telling us what is a trigger?
Yes. So I came prepared. So I have a definition here, which I thought would be useful. And it's from Better Up website. And it says a trigger is a person, place, thing, or situation that elicits an intense or unexpected emotional response. So I
Awesome. Go on.
don't know if you want to add to that, but I thought it summed it
Brilliant.
up.
Thank you very much. That's the definition. So here's something for you. Well, take the definition and apply in to practice for your life. How do you define a trigger for you? So how do you feel a trigger? Trigger is a word that gets talked about very often, right? Triggers work very differently from person to a person. Triggers are very physical. It's a very physical sensation. That's where it starts, anyway, in the first place. It involves five senses. You feel, you taste, you hear. What are the other senses? You see, you see, and then you do something, and it's a physical sensation. So, whenever you are involved in a physical sensation, these sensory experiences, for example, you might be listening to a song now that is being played on the radio right now, but suddenly your whole body might be frozen. You might stand there not knowing what to do, and you might be sobbing because you're responding to something that your body remembers that might have happened years and years and years ago. But you might not be able to figure out what's going on. But you're responding to this song that is being played because that song has a negative attachment in the past. Something's happened in the past. The song was either being played in the background or it has a memory attached to a person that's harmed you, something. But you might not be able to cognitively, on a rational level, figure out what is this thing. That is basically a trigger. It's a very physical experience. It's a real experience. It's a debilitating experience. And sometimes I remember, I mean, Amanda, I'm sure you can contribute here. I remember years ago, you know, there were moments where I was trying to cross the road, but I couldn't. I would stay there. I would stay there, not knowing what to do. Something's happened. I thought of something and I just couldn't move. It's very, very physical and it's very common in trauma survivors, whether it's a big trauma or whether it's a drip, like trauma over the years, like emotional abuse, like narcissistic, toxic, sort of abuse. So it is something that we live with every day. But before we go into the next section of how to recognize this and how to work with it, I'll let Amanda add something to it.
So, I mean, you described it really well, and you're essentially, sometimes when something you feel triggered, I know that word is somewhat overused, but I think you both explained it well. But sometimes you have this exaggerated response to something that happens, and that's because you're not only responding to what's happened in the moment, but you're being triggered from a memory that's in the body from the past event, which was either a perceived or real threat that was happening. So you're going into the fight, flight, or freeze response based on the past event. Because often you dissociate in that moment in the past. And so you don't have a memory attached to it, but it gets stored in the body. I hope that makes some sense there. Um,
Yes, I think so. I think not everybody disassociate.
not
Some people do disassociate, and some people don't. Um, and it's essentially a survival mechanism of the body, and it keeps you safe. If you've experienced in the past very intense feeling, right? There's a disconnection between the body and the mind where body can't take that pain anymore, that there's a disconnection. But what we talk very little, or we acknowledge very little about the impact it has left in the body. Like Amanda said, we're still living in the pain though. This is the thing. We might not have the memory of that. If you access subconscious memory, sometimes the memories do come back. However, physically speaking, somewhere in our body, it's that energy is stuck, and that pain is stuck, and it keeps repeating over and over and over like a broken record, actually causing more damage and harm to the body. So we have shoulder pains, neck pains, back pains, this pain, that pain, chronic illnesses, and later on, perhaps anxiety, depression, PTSD, CPTSD, things that do get pathologized sometimes and get diagnosed later on in life as medical diagnosis. I'm not against medical diagnosis, um, but when they are done in a context, given respect to a person's history, I think anybody will be able to make sense of their diagnosis. But that's the part that's missing in the medical diagnosis. So yeah, we live with this pain, we live with these things that's happened to us because our body stores these things.
yeah.
That's essentially what the triggers does to us. And it just comes out as a very natural, very spontaneous, random response, like an ad hoc things. Like you can't prepare for a trigger. It's just there. It happens.
And there's a really good book, which I'm sure you know about, but Bessel van der Kolk wrote The Body Keeps the Score. And that's all
Yeah.
about you may not be consciously aware of these memories or what happened, but your body remembers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what he talks about in this book is really, really interesting. And any coach, anybody who works in the therapy field knows who Basil van der Kolk is. But this is for the people who might not be aware of trauma yet.
No, no,
What he talks about is you can't explain anything without the language, right? So you need to have a language to be able to explain what is actually going on. And what we're missing today is the language of trauma. So we really don't know what's going on within us. We see the behavior. We might be reactive. We might be snappy at our children. We might push people away in our relationships. We might be really anxious about going on a date. We might be scared to go out there and work with people. There might be different things. That's our behavior. But what we're missing is the language to explain what's happened to us years and years and years ago. And that's why a lot of people are not in tune with their triggers, because we're missing that essential component, which is the language, to be able to recognize that. Because not most of us actually, most of us didn't grow up with the emotional language. Things are changing, thank God. But we didn't grow up with the emotional language. We didn't grow up with the ability to acknowledge what we're feeling is true for us. Instead, we've been gaslighted to believe that that's rubbish. You're fine.
Yeah.
I'm in so much pain. I'm angry, and I'm like in so much pain. But somebody tells me I'm fine, so I'm gonna have to learn to suppress this pain, and our body still has the pain, but we've lost the language to explain it. We've lost the touch with ourselves and our own reality to explain it. And that's why when we come across our triggers on a day-to-day life, it's increasingly difficult for us as adults to first to recognize it, to then give it a name, to acknowledge it. So instead, what we do is, right, there's a problem, I'm in pain, I'm going to go for a glass of wine, that's going to drown it. But
Yeah.
it's not going to drown it. It's making you feel numb to it, but it's not going to drown the pain. So you're up the game. Well, 2 glasses of wine, 3 glasses of wine, bottle of wine, 2 bottles of wine. And I'm just giving you over exaggerated example, but that's how the coping mechanisms develop, you know. So, Amanda, have you got anything to add to that?
No, I was just thinking that, these coping mechanisms, obviously they have a positive intention, and it's important to be compassionate with oneself, but ideally, you want to find obviously healthier resources to go to help you manage. But yeah, that I mean, you've explained it really, really well. In terms of, shall we go into what to do when you feel, when those triggers arise? And
Yes, I think, if I'm allowed,
yeah,
am I all right to stay a little bit longer around the triggers, and
okay.
why is it, why are we also reluctant to acknowledge our triggers as well? I think most of us feel really fearful of acknowledging these triggers, because when we acknowledge it, we're going to have to action, not have to. We feel like, well, we will be compelled to action and take actions on these triggers. And it's scary if this has been our identity for as long as we've known ourselves. And it really is fearful to acknowledge that something terrible, painful has happened or is going on. And there's a belief that I really don't like about myself. And it's very painful and it's scary, and it's really normal to feel that fear. So I think I would really like all of our listeners to feel a bit relaxed and be human about these things. And the last thing I think Amanda and I both intend, we don't want happening, is for people to feel like we're preaching something that, we're preaching you not to be human, and that is not the intention at all. So acknowledge feeling triggers, coping mechanisms, not wanting to deal with the triggers. These are all human experiences, and that's okay. But we'll go into then, recognizing triggers and how to cope with them, and then you will get a bit of a pathway or roadmap to yourself of, actually there is a way out of this, but it's actually not as scary as that. I'll let Amanda take over from there.
I just was going to add that, yeah, that's super important, and acknowledging that, we all get triggered. I mean, it happens even when you've spent a lot of time working on addressing your triggers, and you have the resources in place. It still can happen, and that's okay. Yeah, as you said, we're all human, and it happens. So, but
Yeah.
having the knowledge and learning about what triggers ones, and having those resources in place and doing things differently, having that practical knowledge of things can really help to respond and not react in the moment. And I love, I'm not going to do justice to it, but Viktor Frankl there's an amazing quote about,
Yeah.
uh, between the stimulus and response is where your power lies. So
Yeah.
something like that. But yeah,
Something like that.
it takes
Yeah.
work and effort, and self-compassion.
Practice. I would also say
Practice,
practice.
yes.
It is a skill. Working with your triggers and living with your triggers, it's actually a practice.
Yeah,
You're not going to be born very skillful at it. You're not going to be skillful at it because you're a coach or a therapist, or you're top of the world, or you're very successful. You're not going to be skilled at fully just because any of that. You're not going to be skilled at managing your own triggers just because you're successful in your business, or it's never
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Okay, it really is like learning to walk. You keep tripping, you keep falling, you keep bumping your head, and you keep getting better at it every day, and then it becomes a natural thing eventually. And it takes as long as it takes for you as a human being. So Amanda, if I ask you,
Mm.
um, so how do people recognize triggers? We've talked about what it actually means, and there is a time between a trigger and the stimulus, and then a response. The response is our behavior. It's the way that we manifest our triggers in our normal kind of. It's in a way how we translate our triggers into our normal life to make sense. So how do people recognize that they're triggered? What have you got? Like,
Yeah.
what tricks have you got up your sleeve to tell them, okay, do this?
So, I mean, essentially, the first step is developing that awareness. So, I would say, first of all, developing the awareness of what's happening in your body.
Mm.
So, I will speak for myself. When I feel triggered, when something happens and I find myself reacting in a certain way, I feel something in my body. So often it's racing heartbeat, seems like out of nowhere sometimes. Sweaty palms, my legs maybe feel a bit weak. I'm feeling a bit of I don't know, numbness around my mouth or something like that. So it's recognizing those changes in the body and really tuning in and learning to interpret what's happening, so that you're developing that awareness, so that when something happens again, it's like, oh, my hands feel sweaty, my heart's racing a bit, obviously I'm being triggered by something. So that, I would say, is the first step for me. what
Yeah.
what would be your?
No, I would definitely agree. I definitely agree. It's all about tuning into your body, listening to your body, paying attention to your body, and really having a very positive relationship with your body. And this is not about rejecting the parts of us that's actually triggering us. It really is about integrating and acknowledging and all of that. And I feel compelled here to mention something. I think there's a growing trend of, you know, making everybody else walking on eggshells around our triggers. Triggers are our responsibility. If you're triggered, that's your responsibility. And not a single person on this planet is responsible for your triggers. And it may sound harsh, and there's obviously, that component or the element of, are we living in an empathetic society? Are we living in an understanding and sort of validating society? And it would be fantastic if everybody has the skills to do that. Trust me, it's not going to be the world that we're going to be living in. That not everybody has the skills to validate your feeling, and not everybody will have the skills to tune into your triggers. So it really is 100% your responsibility. And trust me, you will understand, or you will notice this when you learn to be aware of it, and when you learn to communicate it, whether it's in with the colleague, your children, with your partner, at work, anything. When you learn to communicate, say, you know what, I'm not very comfortable. Something is not right with me. Just, can you give me 5 minutes? And people do respect it. People do respect it. And even when you have communicated and people are not responding to it, well, that is not a very positive environment for you to be in. So make the distinction between, you know, um, knowing your triggers and being able to communicate it and wanting, get in the space or the help that you want. But also, yeah, don't walk around this planet thinking that, you feel entitled because you are triggered. And I think I've been watching some conversations on the TV, and it's scary that like everybody wants a trigger warning. And I really don't think it's empowering you as a person to
Mm.
bubble wrap you around your triggers because you're not taking any responsibility. I don't think it's an environment where we will be encouraged to take responsibility for our own triggers. And that's what we need to do. If you want to heal, healing is something that happens in your body and with you and through you. Um, yeah, no amount of trigger warning is gonna do that for you. So bear in mind, I might have actually gone a bit off rail here, but I wanted to say it because I feel like there is a growing trend of
Yeah.
people feeling really entitled. Um, like, oh, I'm triggered. Yeah, it's your responsibility. I can be empathetic and understanding, create the space for you. Also, learn to communicate your triggers and
Yeah.
learn to get the space and learn to heal and be with you. Go into the inner world. Yeah.
And it is a word that's being overused. Triggered. I'm triggered. I'm triggered because I don't know, I stepped on
Yeah.
chewing gum or whatever. But it's it's getting a bit overused, like other.
Yeah, don't use your triggers or the word to walk away from responsibilities or being held accountable. That is not what the trigger is for. It is not a free pass to do anything you want
Yes.
and then walk away from, taking your own responsibility for what you've done as an individual. That is not a free pass at all. It is a healing, it's a doorway to healing
Oh yeah.
and, growing as a human being. And it's yeah, it is a physical language to what might have happened in the past, what's happened in the past. It is not a easy pass to
Yeah.
get away with responsibilities.
I actually wrote something I think that's quite powerful down, which is triggers point us to where work needs to be done.
Yes, it
So,
really does. How can anybody then recognize the we've talked about how to recognize them. Yes, stay tuned with the body. So once somebody recognize a trigger, what can actually they do with it?
yeah. So there are many things. The first thing I would say is pause. Press pause, like stop yourself. Recognize, what you usually do when this happens, and then start to do it differently. So when you're feeling those sensations in the body, recognize, I remember this feeling. I'm just going to pause and I'm going to do something else, and ideally something that you enjoy doing.
Yeah.
So, and with something that you obviously can do in that moment. So whether it's, a walk in nature, maybe that's not possible in that moment, or playing some really fun music that you find energizing, or, there are plenty of resources that you can have at hand, whether it's external or internal. And I know that Nisanka, you have a really wonderful method of helping to self-soothe essentially, and getting back into that parasympathetic state, or more specifically, the ventral vagal state, which we could cover on another time. But that is, just essentially getting into that calmer state of the body. One I love, which is a great resource, is havening techniques. And there's a lot more to it, but some of the basic techniques are, I can just demonstrate now, but essentially stroking the arms from top to bottom
Yeah.
slowly, And it's amazing how immediate the effect can be of just feeling the body relax. And you can also use stroking sensations down your face. And even, I think this is amazing, this one, which is stroking the hands, because you can do it anywhere at any time in a meeting or whatever, under the table, no one's going to notice. So
Yeah.
those are all good things to calm yourself in that moment when you're feeling triggered. So
Yeah.
I'll pass it to you. I
Yeah.
know that also we may have to
Wrap up
do
soon.
part
Yeah.
two.
Yeah, wrap up soon. Thank you. I think we're limited for time. We both need to like obviously get on with our lives today. So just like Amanda said, the everything just coming in, I'm gonna put everything into a nutshell, what we talked about today before we actually wrap this session up. That is, triggers are normal, it happens, it is in our body, it lives with us. Okay, we can't avoid them because they keep coming back to us because it is living with us. So acknowledge them, pause and acknowledge them, and it's happening. And you can question where this might be coming from. You might connect with some sensations, the incidents in the past. Acknowledge, okay? And the next thing is, once you got the awareness, once you've got the recognition and the acknowledgement, the next thing is you can do something to actually manage it more effectively. That is, the techniques that Amanda taught. And there's another one called butterfly tapping. That's just like literally sit down and just keep tapping either side of your shoulder blades, just like that, gently breathe. Yeah. And then it'll immediately, as you can now see, everything that we have taught are very body based. They are body based, because it is in the body, it is in our nervous system. It is all to do with regulating our nervous system. So work with the body. And then long term, heal. Work with coaches, work with, a therapist. I would highly recommend, it is not my place to dictate anything, but I'd highly recommend um, anything that helps you regulate the nervous system. So, not just the mind, but mind, body, and spiritual approach that'll actually take your healing a long way. But if any of you are looking to help, looking um, to get some help with your triggers, and we are both available. You can go into our website. Mine is www.coachingwithnisanka.com, and Amanda's website. I'll let Amanda talk. And yeah, reach out, get in touch. I run a community space as well every second Wednesday of the month, where you can just come in free, no selling, no recording. We'll just help each other and through our energies, supportive energies. But yeah, check our website and decide what you'd like to do. Amanda, well, thank you very much for listening, everybody, and watching.
My website is www.amandahale.co.uk, and the details are below. And I offer a free Facebook group for women. And I have a free guide on communicating with your narcissistic ex when parallel parenting. And just, feel free to reach out for one-to-one coaching as well if you would like, with either of us. And I think we should do part two, because I think there's quite a bit that we didn't cover, that we could cover, other techniques, etc.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. Awesome. We're running out of time. 20 seconds. 19, 18, 17. It's going like really quickly. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Take care. And then we'll come back with another video soon. Take care. Have a good day. Bye-bye.